Hey, Sheila, how are you?
Wayne, I'm great. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you today. Thank you,
Good.
thank you, thank you.
Yay.
And thank you to everyone. And welcome to 27 Minutes with Sheila and Wayne, where we explore the fascinating world of verbs and their impact on our daily lives. Join us each week as we delve into the different ways verbs shape our language and influence our actions, as we attempt to make a positive difference in our world, one verb at a time. And Sheila, wow. Hey, what is our verb for today?
Today's verb is to evaluate.
To evaluate.
To
Ha!
evaluate. I do have a trivia question to answer at the end of the show.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I do. Do you have one as well?
I do not this
Okay.
time. No,
Okay.
okay.
We'll go with mine. What institution paved the way for the annual performance evaluation and what year?
Ooh.
Yeah. So
Huh.
moving on, though, we'll talk about that at the end. I have three definitions for this word.
Okay.
So, to form an idea of the amount, number, or value of something, to assess, or to put a value or price on something.
Hmm. All right. And I have a few others.
Okay.
Evaluate. To judge or calculate the quality,
Oh, good.
importance, or value of
I
something
like that
is
one.
to determine or fix the value of something. And it's like an assessor, right?
Oh,
Ooh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. And form a critical opinion of. And then the
Hmm.
last one is much like the first one, estimate the nature, quality, ability, extent, or significance of
Okay.
something. And
Great.
and I like that one because it says estimate the nature. And I'm thinking,
Hmm.
wow, that's a cool word to bring into this fold. All right. And what did you think about evaluate when we first said, let's do evaluate?
You know, at first I thought, oh, performance evaluations, how boring. But in fact, I do like performance evaluations if you use them to learn not only how to do better what you're doing, but to understand what you're being evaluated by and therefore where to direct your efforts in the future. Because you may think you're doing a great job, but that might not be how they're measuring your performance. So,
Aha.
so it's a good way to learn more about how you're doing. But then I got very excited, Wayne, when I started thinking about fake news and
Uh-oh.
how to evaluate and how to, you had mentioned to judge and to critically examine in your definitions. So when you have biased headlines, how to evaluate the basic truth, the real truth behind the headlines. And I found this great article called Learning to Analyze and Critically Evaluate Ideas, Arguments, and Points of View. And I remembered two things. Number one, in ninth grade, being in a debate with someone in class, and the person who won the debate was the loudest person, not necessarily the one with the best ideas. And
Okay.
number two, you have been a teacher and a professor and used the Socratic method of teaching, and that is covered in this article really well when they
Oh.
say that teaching teachers excuse me, that teachers who are interested in teaching critical evaluation skills spend less time on preparing lectures and more time on preparing critical thinking problems for students to wrestle with.
Mm.
And I think that was your technique,
And some of my students did not like it because I gave
right?
them too much to ponder, too much to read.
Yep. Yep.
But they
But
enjoyed the classes. But
well, and you're stretching the mind, and sometimes that's not comfortable.
and I didn't only stretch their mind; they
Right.
also stretched my mind
Nice.
because teaching, like communication and any
Hmm.
other thing that we've talked about
Hmm.
thus far over our last hundred and some odd
Right.
episodes,
Yay.
it's a two-way street. Everything
Nice.
is a two-way
Yep.
street.
Yep.
Um,
And that fits with one of the lines from this article that said learning the skill can prepare you to take an engaged to be, excuse me, an engaged citizen in a democratic society.
aha. All
I
right.
thought you'd be interested in knowing too. The writers of this article came from Vanderbilt University, Princeton University, and the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College.
Oh, really?
Yes, yeah. So,
All right.
although
Ha.
Army, not Air Force, I get that.
Well,
We'll,
that's
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
We'll,
yeah.
we'll give Army we'll give Army a go on this one.
Okay,
Yay,
all right.
go Army.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
I only say that once.
That's enough. So where did you go down? What path did you go down with to evaluate?
I again, these verbs offer so many perspectives
Yeah.
to touch on,
Hmm.
and again, reading a plethora of articles, looking at this, looking at that, I
Hmm.
stumbled upon an article written "The Secrets of Great CEO Selection."
Okay.
Evaluating how a CEO is selected. And I thought, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
So I read the article and I go, wow, this is too long and laborious. Uh, and then I read it again and I go, but I can cut some of this stuff out because he's got some really good nuggets in here. So
Okay.
I'm gonna do this. But what really caught my eye was his method of research, because he did something that I have done many times, and he talks about his experiences and his knowledge and the things that he'd been doing, because he has been on boards and he had been directors of boards and chairmen of boards, and he's been on this and that kind of committee. So he's had many observations of board members doing selection process for many things.
Hmm.
I used to be a motivational speaker, and I talked to kids over the years. I'm going to say about 3 years, and I would talk to 800 a pop at a time. And so I had interactions with, a couple thousand kids,
Hmm.
and I did some similar kinds of things. I did my own internal survey,
Hmm.
in interviewing some of these kids. And anyway, I'll talk about that at the end if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all. I
Just a
look
little
forward
bit.
to it.
Okay, excellent. All right. So anyway, The Secrets of Great CEO Selection by Shanan, or
Okay.
Sharon, I'm sorry, Ram Sharan. Got it right
Okay.
that time. Yes.
Good.
Right. He says, in summary, when it comes to selecting a new CEO, judgment really matters. The choice may devastate a company or create
Hmm.
enormous value.
Hmm.
In his work advising companies, Sharon has observed that some board members are especially great at succession decisions. And this, he says, and now here's more.
Hmm.
He says, the first thing, nothing good comes of having the wrong CEO.
Good point.
Don't we see that
Oh,
in
yeah.
the news a lot here?
Definitely. Yep.
He says, and mentoring, coaching senior team members with complementary skills and special help from board members can't compensate for that. And I know we talked about a podcast earlier on. It was Improve, and we talked about what do some or not many mid-level and upper-level managers have?
Hmm.
Coaches.
Hmm. Oh,
And
yeah.
he says even throwing coaches at the people who are wrong for the position doesn't help. Doesn't
Oh,
help. They cannot pull them out of
right.
the bad bag and put them in the good bag, because there's just no help for those individuals. So
Oh,
okay.
uh,
So, but he says, on the other hand, I've seen some surprising CEO appointments that have turned out extraordinarily. And he
okay.
says, how do you do that? He says, why are some boards great at hiring company leaders while others struggle? Fair question.
Yeah.
He says, in my experience, board members who are adept at picking CEOs do four things others don't. And here they are.
Okay.
They work painstakingly to clarify the essential qualities needed to succeed in the job.
Okay.
They keep an open mind about where the best candidate will come
Hmm.
from.
Okay.
They go deep to understand which candidate is the best fit.
Mm.
And lastly, they allow for imperfections in the chosen candidate. And I thought,
Mm.
wow, I've never heard that before. They allow for imperfections
Hmm.
for the chosen candidate. So again, that caught my eye, and that made me excited to bring this article to light in our podcast.
Yeah.
Because that last one has some telling things, and I'll tell you nearing the end of his article what those are.
Okay.
So, which way did you go?
After
Besides, I'm sorry,
no, that's okay.
besides the performance report here
Well, and fake news.
and fake
Um,
news.
I looked up a site because I thought, so we know that especially if you get your news on social media, It's all over. And there are words that stand out that just kind of, you have an emotional response to, positive or negative. So I found this great site. I don't usually recommend a specific site, but this one it's from Texas A&M University Libraries. So
Huh. Okay.
tamu.libguides.com, and it lists all sorts of resources that you can use to fact check. Some of them you might have heard, like Snopes, and Snopes, which
Yes.
investigates internet claims.
Uh-huh.
Factcheck.org is it's a project of the Annenberg Public Policy Center of the University of Pennsylvania, and that's really more about politics. Allsides.com is actually something that I use. I downloaded the app, and it lists the media bias of articles as either left, right, or center, and it gives you one of each of those. So you have a feel for what's, maybe just fact oriented.
Yes.
Another one for global news is called reporterslab.org, which is fact checking global news.
Hmm.
There are many more resources, and I just really think that an excellent. You still have to dig around, you still have to research, but isn't that what we're supposed to do when we're evaluating the news?
Yes, we are.
Thank you. Okay.
And as I look at the internet and I see all of the headlines, I've
Yes.
I've evaluated. I've noticed something, and I go, you know what? I've seen this 7 times now. All they
Hmm.
do is just take out this person's name and plug in this person's name. you know, like
Yeah.
and the caption is still the same. It just has a different name, and I'm going, okay, you guys need to be a little bit more creative because this is boring. How many
Well, and
times? How many
yeah,
times can you say, "Oh, what he did was disastrous"?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
yeah, just take
Yep.
out he and put in what Bob did was disastrous. What Wayne did was this. What June did was,
What
okay,
Sheila did, right, right.
let's be more creative here. Yes, you
Well,
you
and I
caught my.
think
Go ahead.
part of evaluating the news is to be a little bit skeptical of everything, and if that motivates you then to do the research, I think that's very healthy.
And go Aggies. great,
Okay,
great
there you
site,
go.
great source there. I like that. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So anyway,
Yes.
Ram says, while we're looking at the secrets of great CEO selection,
Yep.
he says, finding the pivot. And I go, huh, what's finding the pivot?
Right.
He says boards should always have a viable pool of CEO candidates. And in some
Ah.
cases of a sudden succession crisis, a so called name in the envelope is there. He
Hmm.
says, but when the moment of truth is imminent, directors who make great CEOs picks seek those lists, or I'm sorry, set those lists aside. So
Hmm.
I'm thinking, okay, so they have a list, and he says, don't use the list because he
Hmm.
says they start by understanding the current and future requirements of the job,
Hmm.
zeroing in on the critical capabilities that will make or break the company. The result is not a laundry list of leadership traits
Mm.
any CEO should have, nor is it a single item. It's a strand of 2 or 3 capabilities that are tightly interwoven and required for the new leader to succeed. So he says,
Okay.
this is what makes the decision turn toward one candidate over another. And that's why I call it the pivot. And it reminds me of a time when I was at work, and I was going into a presentation to my boss's boss, the big guy.
Hmm.
And my boss had told me like last week, okay, Wayne, we're going to do this, and we're going to brief the boss on Monday, and this is the avenue we're going to take. We're going to choose Plan A, and you got to study Plan A to the hilt. Okay, great. I've got Plan A down. Monday comes, I'm in front of the boss and his boss is way high up on the food chain, and I'm way down on the food chain. So I'm ready and I'm shaking and I'm nervous. And my boss says to his boss, "Okay, boss, yeah, we've looked at Plan A and Plan B, and we're going to talk about this and this pros and cons, and we have a recommendation for you." And Wayne is ready to do that. And his boss says, "Good, because I'm ready to hear why you guys like Plan B, because I love Plan B."
Oh.
And my boss looked at me and says, "And Wayne is ready to tell you that."
Oh.
So I had to pivot.
Right. Okay, thank you for showing how pivot works there.
so
Find
I
the
threw
pivot point.
so I threw my list away. as Ram says, I threw my list away, and because I had done my homework, I knew the
Good.
I knew the pros and cons to both, and boom, I ad-libbed why B was better.
Whew.
Yes. So number two, he says, when you're choosing the final candidate, judgment about the fit matters. And I've heard fit. You're not a good fit, or this is not a good fit,
Right.
and I've never really heard it at this level. And it obviously it works at lower levels, so why shouldn't it work at this one? But he says each situation is distinct, and so is each CEO's job pivot. So it's important to identify the pivot in very specific terms and to get it right.
Hmm.
And he says, directors who choose the right CEOs do a lot of work before arriving at the pivot, and they take the time to fully understand the company's current challenges and how the external context is going to work and is changing. And he says, and that's where fit comes in.
Mm.
Because if you've got one candidate who's rigid and not
Mm.
flexible, that's not going to be a good fit for something that has changing environments what 3 or 4 times a day. He says
Right.
you got to have that
Right.
right CEO who's going to be able to um, fit in there and work with all of those things that's going on. So I like pivot and I like fit. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, I do too. Thank you.
Okay, I have 3 more, but I'll wait for you. No, I
Well,
have
I'll
four
just
more.
throw some quotes in here.
Okay.
John Dickerson, an American journalist, said, and this one makes me think a little bit. Chess masters don't evaluate all the possible moves. They know how to discard 98% of the ones that they could make and then focus on the best choice of the remaining lot. That's the way expertise works in other fields too. Wise practitioners recognize familiar patterns and put their skills towards the marginal ideas instead of the ones that they already can recognize. So that ends kind of in a fuzzy way, but it reminds me of what you're describing here too. The right fit includes someone who has the experience to know what works, what's important, and what to discard.
Exactly. Yes, and they discarded 90% of their moves because they knew it wouldn't work.
Right.
So they were a good fit. So I, you know what? It's amazing how several times we have come together and from distances of
Hmm.
10 miles, 15 miles, 4 miles, whatever it is, and also not looking at what you're doing, you're not looking at
Right.
what I'm doing, and have come up with articles or at least concepts that absolutely bond and fit and gel together.
Yes.
This is
Yes.
so fun. This is so fun.
Yeah. Thank you.
I
I agree.
appreciate it.
I agree.
Yes. Okay. Another quote, or was that it?
I'll do one more and then get back to your ideas here. Critical thinking. This is Daniel Levitin, an American scientist, who said critical thinking is not something you do once with an issue and then drop it. It requires that we update our knowledge as new information comes in. Time spent evaluating claims is not just time well spent. It should be considered part of an implicit bargain we've all made.
Huh. Okay.
That has more to do with science than the work field, but I think that it all blends together nicely.
I agree.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So go on with your.
Ram says keeping
Yes.
an open mind while you're looking for a new CEO, keeping an open mind. He says
Ah,
when drafting the final short list of candidates who might fit and the pivot, skilled board members start with a clean slate. They realize that in a fast-paced business world, a company's needs can suddenly shift, and the entire set of candidates their succession plan identified may now be irrelevant. They back off from longtime favorites and keep an open mind. They battle against hidden assumptions and biases and their own and other people's, as they hone in on 2 or 3 prospects and ultimately a final choice. And
and
he goes on and says, it can be from someone in the mid-level of your company.
interesting.
And I said, wow, that's a bold statement because we're talking about younger aged
Yes.
individuals as
Yes.
opposed to the gray hairs. And I
Yeah.
and I said to myself, okay, I've been watching football basically all my life. And what's different now in the coaches is we have some very young head coaches on NFL teams. That was not the norm 10 years ago.
Uh-huh.
The norm 10 years ago was when one coach gets fired because they lost the Super Bowl, another team just picked them right up. And
Yeah.
so you had the
Yeah.
same old dudes, old dudes
Right.
in charge of these football um, teams. But nowadays, you got 34, 35-year-olds who are head coaches. And that's demonstratively different from what was 10 years ago. So Rom says, keep an open mind because it can come from the middle of your organization, come from outside your organization,
Mhm.
it come from anywhere.
Cool.
So don't bring biases to the table. It
Cool.
has to be an older person. I thought, how cool is that?
That's cool.
Yes. He says directors should be willing to look at leaders for a few levels below the a few levels below the CEO. Again,
Okay.
emphasizing the the younger ones that are out
Right.
there. So
Right.
very, very cool. I liked this article. As I read it for about the fourth or fifth time, I'm thinking, yeah, this is really good. But here's the one that I like almost the best.
Okay.
Planning for imperfection. And I said, wow, planning for imperfection. What does that mean? I know what it means to me. And I turned away from the article and I was thinking planning for imperfection. And I thought, is that imperfection on the company side? Is that imperfection on the CEO side? Where is this imperfection? And he says in his first paragraph of this, every CEO has an open flank. Now, if you don't know what flank is, to our listening audience, flank is a side that is not protected, or could be unprotected. And so he's saying every CEO has an open flank. And what he's saying is every CEO has a side that's not protected. So what does that mean? The typical vetting process will bring candidates' quirks and flaws to the surface, but wise selectors accept imperfection when they make their decision. Trade-offs are inevitable. For example, many CEOs who come from strategy, planning, or finance backgrounds are weak on people skills or operating skills. Meanwhile, leaders who are strong in digital technology may be weak on finance. And he's absolutely right. No one has the perfect bag of goods that answers everything.
Yeah.
And so what he's saying is when you're hiring this person, you also need to look at, again, the fit. Again, look at the open-mindedness of who is surrounding this individual as a team member, partner, trusted agent that the CEO can rely on to strengthen the open flank that they have. And I thought, how cool is that? Very, very cool.
Very cool.
Yes, I mean, golly, but looking at you, you have no open flank. So as X says, you make it sound good. So but you have all my flanks covered that are open. I'm sure I have about 5 flanks that are open.
Not at all.
And
Not
you
at all.
covered them so well. So thank you for that.
I I do want to throw in a nice quote here. Not so closely related to what you're saying, but I wanted to make sure and get this one in before we hit the end of our show.
Oh, yes,
And
because
this
we're at
is
23 minutes. Yes,
okay.
okay.
American actress Marla Gibbs says, "In my life, I've learned that true happiness comes from giving. Helping others along the way makes you evaluate who you are. I think that love is what we're all searching for. I haven't come across anyone who didn't become a better person through love."
Wow.
And, I think this does kind of fit what you're talking about in a corporate standpoint, because we have to take our authentic selves wherever we go. It's not worth it if you can't be who you are at your core in the work that you choose to do, because you spend so much of your life there. So if you're a better person through love, then you're going to guard the flank of the person that you respect and care for, who happens to be your boss. So
yes,
does that tie that together a little bit, or am I stretching it?
No, I like that. I
Okay.
do. I like it very much. Gosh.
Okay.
And okay, we're at 24:20, so I'm moving on here.
Yes.
The last one that he had that Ram has is selecting the search leaders. And I thought, of course, I tend to think that many times the board, whoever the board is,
Right.
they're the ones who, okay, it's the CEO. We're going to make the decision. And so we're going to be the ones to look. And Ram says, no, you need to get away from that. He says, you pick selection committees for other positions, pick the right selection committee for the CEO as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, that's going to help the board possibly pick someone that does not look like the board.
Right.
Because so many times we see people and you say, how did that person get hired? And the answer is, well, look at who hired them.
Yeah.
They think and act just like that person. So they saw themselves and they said, oh, well, this is a good person because so we got to hire them.
I understand this person. I know exactly where they're coming from.
Exactly. Yes. And, but yeah, they forget how bad they are or they don't know.
You don't know what you don't know. Yeah.
Yes. All right. And how about you? Anything else you want to tell us before we hit the last
it.
point?
Nope.
That's it?
You hit your last points and then I'll answer our trivia question.
Okay. I said that I had this thing on emotional intelligence that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
Because, Daniel Goleman helped emotional intelligence, aka emotional quotient, gain popularity in 1995, way back in 1995.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that long ago.
Oh, but and the term emotional intelligence was coined, I think, back in 65, somewhere around there.
Okay. All
but
right.
Goldman made it popular in 95. Anyway, so looking at that, I had introduced the concept of the motivational quotient in 1998.
Yay.
And I, much like the author of the article that we just talked about today, completed a self-study of several hundreds of young kids over the years. And I believe there's a special secret indicators that we can use to identify kids that we must take a closer look at to help them reach and surpass any and all expectations in their journey through early education.
Great.
Because we let too many kids fall through the cracks of education because we're assuming, we're assessing them on the wrong instruments and letting them fall perilously behind their peers, when in fact they could excel if we only used different methods to evaluate them. And I have come up with a couple methods to evaluate individuals, much like talent scouts can look at a kid, an athlete, for about 15 or 20 seconds and go, that kid's got potential. We got to watch him. I used to talk to kids. I've talked to so many kids. As I said, I've stood in front of 800s at a time. I talked to so many. There were some questions and some just conversations that I would have with them, and things that they would say would just stand out within that 2-minute discussion. And I go, that's a kid that we need to really watch and help him or her in a different way, because this kid's got potential and we're going to lose it because of the assessment things that we have right now. They're not going to do well on. So anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Okay.
All right. Sheila, I'm sorry I spent too much time. Would you take us home, please?
Well, the trivia question was, what institution and when paved the way for the annual performance evaluations? It was 1950. The U.S. government did the Performance Rating Act. Yep. And it was just geared towards government employees. There is no requirement that an employer evaluates people in the private business, but that set the groundwork. So there we go.
Ha! All right. Go U.S. government.
Yeah.
Okay, so a shout out to the Aggies and a shout out to the U.S. government. Yay.
Yay. Well, and as always, we evaluate ourselves in large part by the feedback that we get from other people. And so we encourage you to contact Wayne or myself with constructive feedback and anything else that you liked hearing, because we take it to heart. So thank you, everybody, for listening. And thank you, Wayne.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Sheila. Bye-bye. See you next week.